In this video, you're going to hear me talk about my winter training philosophy and how I got started as a coach. It's part of the Track and Field Performance podcast run by Colm.
Actually, it's funny, one thing I probably haven't told you, although we met in person for the first time in May, is that I've been familiar with what you've been doing well before you started that YouTube channel, which was some years ago. I remember an athlete of yours that was European Junior Champion. It's a great introduction for you, but you coached the European Junior Champion a few years ago, and Elliot Safo was kind of my age. Yeah. And I remember wanting to find out what he was doing for training. So I remember looking on a Facebook page of yours where you would post your sessions there. And I think it was like, you were saying accelerations 4x10 meters and things like that. And it was interesting because at that time I was doing very much endurance-based work. And that was the first actual glimpse of, let's say, me understanding that there was other ways to do it than quote unquote work hard, which is funny because it's probably something we're going to get into today in some shape or form. But yeah, I've been kind of familiar with you as far back as that kind of original training group you have. But to start things off, I actually want to go back further than that, which is your athlete background, because you're a pretty nifty long jumper in your time, weren't you?
Meters 89 and ran 21.8, but those correlations there, 7:89, 21.8, might indicate how I didn't train properly, because my 100-meter time was 11 dead. Now I'm quicker, I reckon I was quicker than 11 dead, but we'll go on to that a little bit later on in how I was probably doing the wrong training, and that's what's informed me now as a coach to better train the athletes like Elliot, who you mentioned back in 2011 onwards. So yeah, I was an international athlete, and I coached more or less all my life because I worked in sports development and leisure centre management, different sports. But I only started doing athletics seriously, coaching-wise, when I was around about late 40s, 2010, around then. But I've got quite a unique background as well in that I've been a magazine journalist, editor, and I've written a number of books on sports, health and fitness. I've trained with sportsmen and women across numerous events, from rowing to football to track, and having to write about it from a theoretical and an anecdotal standpoint has enabled me to pick up a lot of knowledge which I'm able to transfer into my coaching. So I think I've been blessed with a background that enables me to coach probably slightly differently to others, in that I'm a creative person, and that creativity enables me to, I was going to say, make up coaching on the go, but in a way I do, because you have to learn how to coach on the fly. But that's going to go on to probably what we're going to talk about later. But my background, is multifaceted really in terms of sport, fitness. Yeah, as I said earlier, I've written and been to various events all around the world, even ultra marathons. So I could even talk about endurance, not that I want to. But that's partly how I learn how not to coach long and triple jump, because I know what happens to the body when you train for endurance. So anyway, I thought those are things that we will go on to later, but that's probably my I suppose I should bring you up to date. I've had a lot of success with junior athletes, but that's because I get them to be of a high standard to go to universities. Then I lose them for 3 to 4 years, and then I get them back. Now that annoys me slightly, because I would like to be able to coach somebody from 13 all the way through to 30. But my system, my approach works very much so with young athletes. And it's not that difficult, it's not that different with older athletes as well. I use very similar methodology, but I have a reputation for year in, year out producing young talented jumpers. I think I thought it was easy to start off with Elliot Safo, Oliver Newport, jumping 770, Elliot 786 within 2 years of me coaching both of them, and a 756 guy as well. Obviously these guys had talent, but what it did show me that I must be coaching them properly. Even from the onset, I had a philosophy which was less is more, specific work, highly technical, highly speed orientated. Do only what you need to do, not what you think you need to do. There's a lot of things you can eschew, you can discard from training. So I learned from my own experiences as a jumper that I never knew how to take off properly. I couldn't hold my free leg, for example, when taking off. So that was something paramount importance that I had to get my young athletes, my young jumpers to be able to do. Speed. If you're not fast enough, you're never going to jump 8 meters or 680, male and female respectively. Boil it down. I realised very quickly that you boil it down to what will make you better. You don't need to do the tempo training, the speed endurance, although I'll get shot down in flames by quite a few coaches for saying that. I've had young athletes this year go to the Commonwealth Youth Games, one from the UK or England, one from Trinidad. I coach athletes online as well as physically. I work out of South London, and we seem to have a good catchment for talent. But I think it's also, I was once told or asked, is long jump an easy event to coach? And the reason why I was asked that, because regardless of the distance that the person was jumping, the young athlete or the older athlete, they're all jumping further. So they thought, the other coaches thought it must be an easy event to coach because they're all getting better. It's how you coach. If you coach somebody technically, even if they're not the most talented of people, they're still going to jump further. And that's a huge area that I think is missing in long jump or triple jump coaching, but long jump in particular, because long jump is often seen as a non-technical event, or not as technical. You just have to run fast and take off. That's why very young athletes, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, can jump prodigious distances, because they're doing it maybe because they're physically more mature than others, but they are very fast and very powerful. But to get somebody from, say, 7:20, 7:30 at 16 to 7:80, 8 metres at 19:20, it's not easy. It's easy if you know what you're doing. It's not easy if you don't know what you're doing. And I don't mean to sound facetious in any way there, but I have an approach that literally 99% of athletes, if I throw the approach, my philosophy, my periodization models at them, they will improve, no matter whether they're going to be a 7-metre jumper or an 8-metre jumper. Whatever I've come up with works. So I guess that's encapsulating my background, a little bit about my philosophy, and where I am now. Yes, I've coached for England, I've done work for Great Britain, Ireland. I did some mentoring sessions for Irish athletics, Belgium, and I'm currently doing some mentoring work for European athletics, which was a bit scary because I'm doing the triple jump, and I'll freely admit that I know more about long jump than I do triple jump, but I was asked to mentor triple jump coaches, some of which have produced 17-metre jumpers and are national coaches. So it forced me to learn more about the triple, but it's very interesting that nobody knows everything. We all know different things, and by me talking to these high-level coaches, I'm learning myself, and hopefully I'm giving them things to think about. Questioning why you're doing that. I think if we as coaches don't question why we're doing things, we won't get the answers, but we won't think. It's very easy to just do what you've done for years and years and years, and until somebody actually says, well, why are you doing 6 weeks of 300-metre running or speed endurance running at the beginning of the season? And the other coach, as we all do, might become defensive, but you've got to try not to be defensive. If you genuinely believe and can justify why a certain modality produces results, fine. And if it produces results for you and your athletes, fine. But if you're just doing it because it's been done for decades, or your coach gave it to you to do, then it shouldn't be done. You need to think really about what's going to benefit, and you need to be an individual. You need to be individualistic. You need to be specific to the needs of each athlete as well, identify their strengths and weaknesses. Anyway, I think I'm going on a little bit there, but go ahead. Yeah.
Not at all, John. And I think the great thing about, let's say, what you do is, in comparison to maybe some of the other guests that I get on here, is that, you know, I can see through your YouTube channel, which we'll definitely talk more about later in the conversation, is that your methodology and techniques, etc., and thinking on things is very public, you know, and you know, you present it in a way that's oftentimes backed by research. You talk about the empirical evidence behind some, you know, components of your training. And so, yeah, I've got a good glimpse into what you kind of tend to gravitate towards and what you tend to discard. And some of the things there, you mentioned them and where they may have even come from your own background. So, yeah, I definitely want to kind of touch on some of those things a little bit more. And I suppose, briefly speaking, if we just want to start the conversation off by talking about maybe your winter structure. I know you made a video on that recently. So the winter training, perhaps on a weekly basis, what that entails, broadly speaking, and the components within it, and then perhaps what you feel is not there compared to maybe some of the other philosophies that you've seen and why that might be. And you've alluded to some of those things as well, the tempo running, etc.
I think we need to start off from the premise of where I start from, and I use an undulating block periodization methodology. I don't use traditional linear periodization. So there's no GPP, general preparation phase of any extent. It's all almost like the competition specific training that we're doing all year round. So I'm undulating all the elements that are going to produce great long jump, triple jump performance, ability to swing the takeoff, free leg at takeoff, for example, foot plant, developing leg stiffness, heel recovery for sprinting from the start of the training year. I don't want to waste time plodding around a track just to get fitter. As my athletes will testify, our sessions will last for 2 hours, or hour and a half to 2 hours. There might be 5 to 6 units of drills of various components, jigsaw pieces that fit the long and triple jump puzzle together. So my fitness is specific jump fitness developed through repetition of specific drills of a high volume. And that's what we're doing at the beginning of the season. The volume of the drills is more, the intensity is slightly dialed back. But I will give you an example. We're doing downhill running at the beginning of the season. Now, and downhill drills, skipping drills, free leg landing takeoffs, scissors. Now, a lot of coaches might bring that in pre-season as a way to sharpen up the athlete, but I'm doing it from the start because overspeed training, generally speaking, doesn't work as an overspeed modality unless you've got parachutes that lift the athlete and reduce the drag, the friction against the track surface, because you're going to want to brake a little bit. It's particularly downhill. Your cadence, you may feel faster, but you're braking on each step. But the hidden ingredient of that training, I was going to throw it back to you. What do you think it might be from downhill training?
Probably development of eccentric capacity, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
Which is for takeoff, handling or conversion of the speed upon takeoff.
Yeah, exactly. It's all those elements and more. It's about sprinting. The quicker you get off the ground in sprinting from the foot contact and the amortization, I never can say that word, phase, and the better the eccentric phase is of the stretch reflex, the quicker you're going to be. So a lot of these things are lateral thinking with my training. We want to improve the ability to get greater vertical velocity, both for the triple jump and the long jump, and improve sprint speed. Well, we're going to use downhill runs and drills as a means to that end, because I've looked at research. Most of it says you won't get faster from doing it directly, but indirectly you potentially can from the eccentric gains. And also another theme of my training throughout the training year is potentiation, joining a couple of modalities together so that you get a potentiating effect. Don't train weights in isolation, train weights with plyometrics at the same time. So you boost neural response and fast twitch fiber capability for rapid force development. I don't think it's rocket science when you really think about it, but again, not trying to sound conceited, I don't think a lot of people really think that way. I've asked my athletes, internationals, do you know of any other coaches who train similar to me? I know there are at the elite level, but in the generality, there aren't that many. And I'm often, I won't say criticised, but the eyebrows are raised when I say we don't do tempo, when I say we don't sprint much longer than 90 metres. Well, of course we do some runs beyond 90, but let's just talk about the concentration of my training. And they say, well, where's your fitness coming from? And I'm saying, well, do one of my sessions, or I'm explaining as I just have to you that the volume, the intensity is creating the specific fitness, the reactivity, as I've said, the speed, the technical ability to swing the hip, again, as I've said. And a lot of that, I don't know whether it goes over people's heads, but they just get stuck in their way of thinking. And as I said again, as coaches, we need to question, we need to think, are we doing the right things? It doesn't necessarily compare, but I'm going to say it. If you train for a marathon, you're going to do mileage, you're going to do volume. There is a right way to train for the marathon, more or less. You're not going to be able to run a 2-hour marathon by doing 100-metre sprints. But that reverse logic for the long jump often doesn't get applied. Why are we doing 300 metre, 400 metre hurdler, 400 metre flat training for long and triple jump? There is a right way, in my opinion, humble opinion, to train for the jumps, as there is a more or less right way for the marathon as well. Of course, people have variations in terms of mileage, but you're going to do aerobic work, you're going to do sustained tempo efforts, etc., etc. And that logic, I don't think sometimes gets applied to long and triple jump. we don't do circuit training for a start, or very little circuit training. Yeah, you go on Instagram and everybody's jumping up and down, doing press-ups, crunches, etc., etc. If you do 3 times 30 meters of a marching drill, then 3 times 20 meters of heel recovery lunges, a very specific movement, and then I'll walk through the takeoff movements, you're developing local muscular endurance, pre-training, preconditioning in a much more specific way than doing your press-ups, your tricep dips and movements such as that. So I developed the qualities needed to jump far from a different perspective, from a very specific one, but it still produces the fitness, because none of my jumpers run out of steam halfway through a competition. I mean, you're training the lactic energy system anyway, 4 to 6 seconds of effort. You need the high energy phosphates and chemicals to replenish in your muscles. And that actually adapts to training. I think a lot of people don't realise that. You think about anaerobic fitness, then you get better at buffering lactate as it develops. But if you train the lactic system, you get better at producing the high intensity phosphates and chemicals that produce high powered energy. So that's why we train that way. To me, it's logic, and perhaps I'm a too logical person, but that's the way I apply it. So my winter training now isn't too dissimilar to the summer training. The months of October and November have greater variation because we don't do pit work, but we're still doing takeoff drills, penultimate step work. Pit work starts in about October, together with run-up work, should have said end of November, together with run-up work. And my mat drills that you may have seen on the YouTube channel in terms of setting up with takeoff. Yeah, that's another art, a dark art of long jump, how to actually take off. Something, again, I don't think people fully understand. I mean, I didn't 10, 11 years ago, and I'm still learning now. I experiment with things, but again, trying to get back on topic. So I am specifically general at the start of the season, so that the work we're doing is not overly detraining. I go back to where I started at the beginning when I started talking to you about my own training. This is what I understand. This is what I experienced firsthand. 6 weeks of 300 meters running, 3 sessions a week or 200s. I never got fast. Well, I tongue-in-cheek that. By the time the indoor season came, I was probably only as fast as I was at the beginning of the time we started winter training. Mm-hmm. You just wasted the summer season where you're supposedly in peak condition to detrain yourself, to then rebuild up to try and get going fast again. Again, now I'm not original saying this. Jeremy Fisher, Dan Paff, they all train, the elite coaches train speed all year round, but I think the generality of coaches out there, and I think because I reach those coaches through my social media, it's like, well, how do you train speed all year round? You can't. You've got to build up. You can't just go flat out from the start, because how do you peak? Well, that's another story. You know, peaking through undulating periodization and block methods is a lot easier than doing it from a linear perspective. You can only hold on to your peak for limited amounts of time through linear traditional periodization methods. A lot of the match VF methods as well have been disproved over the years as well as not actually working. And again, if you employ logic, it was researched many years back that double and triple periodization works better for long triple jump and sprints than single periodization. Again, I could throw the question back at you if you want to answer it and say, well, why do you think that's the case? So single versus double versus triple, and why does double and triple jump periodization seem to work better than single for jumping and sprinting? Anything?
I'm actually not too familiar with double and triple periodization. I'm definitely familiar with single, so you might want to even just give the audience, for those who are in the same kind of boat as me, a little bit of background into what that is, or maybe perhaps I call it something different. Yeah. I know they're very familiar with your undulating and linear phrasing there, but go ahead and explain the double and triple.
Well, simply put, single is 1 peak in a year, double is 2 peaks in a year, and triple is 3 peaks in a year. So the rationale for the double and triple periodization models is there's more specific work in there. So if you think about it logically, there was research done that showed that you get greater percentage gains in, I can't remember, it's high jump and long jump from the research I can remember, from our double periodization year. And again, it's staring you in the face. Why? Because there's more specific work in there. So the logic is when you utilise a training modality that doesn't deviate too far from the requirements of the event, you're going to get a greater return. So.
And you know what's funny, John? I'm going to actually just kind of give my own anecdotal background, because it was all kind of brewing up there as you're talking, and actually very much like so connected to all the ideas you just put out there. So just when I was my first coach, very much the approach of endurance training at that time, and we would not hit speed work until like 2 weeks before indoor season. I would end up getting dramatically better by each competition through the season, because I was literally just touching on specific speed and work for the first time. And it would take me forever to hit a peak in the year. And when that peak hit, it was dramatically bigger than the rest, but very hard to emulate again. And funnily enough, then I went after that period of time, went to Dublin and switched over to a coach there, and he had kind of said, look, we're going to be doing acceleration work from the beginning of the year, but we're going to do it in trainers. We're going to do our shoes for the Europeans, and we're going to do it on grass, but they're going to be max effort. Mm-hmm. He says, but the thing is, we're only going to do over 20 meters. So number one, you're not going to hit top speed. He's like, it's impossible. And you're on runners and in grass. But he's like, we're getting the technical rehearsal piece down, and we're also, developing the nervous system and all the muscles that are relevant to sprinting fast, involved from the beginning. So we're not going from this massively slow twitch type training. And then you mentioned we're not also detraining ourselves off the back of a really successful summer too. And yes, then my experience was thereafter that I would have a good indoor season. I'd also have a good outdoor season. They maybe wouldn't deviate as much from each other in terms of, like, let's say the gap wouldn't be 50 centimeters between my indoor and my outdoor. My two peaks might be within 20 centimeters of each other. But I do believe that my own personal experience does kind of fall in line when I went to the more specific training, that I was kind of able to keep things up. And personally, if it helps to speak to the audience in any way that may be thinking towards the endurance side, I never ran out of gas myself with that way of thinking. It was a much more if I got injured, it was a much more complex thing than that. It wasn't necessarily just you hadn't done enough endurance. Like, I think that's a very singular, like very narrow, like kind of closed-minded way to look at it, or not. I mean, not closed-minded, but there's more variables at play than that oftentimes,
As usual, many thanks for watching this slightly different type of content. Podcasts are a great way to develop your knowledge and understanding of athletics, training and event specifics. If you have any specific questions on the content of this segment, or indeed the content from any of my other videos, then do leave a question or a comment in the section below. And of course, good luck with your training at the moment. And do like and subscribe.